Coming up on Kizmet.
It is far better to be alone than to be in a relationship.
Welcome to the Kizmet podcast, where we explore your world of post-divorce reinvention, connection, and your pursuit of passion. Join us as we navigate love's second act. Hi again, I'm Kiz, the host of Kizmet, Life and Sex After Divorce. Today, I'm thrilled to have author and columnist Kerri Sackville here with me. Kerri's many things, including an acclaimed author of 5 books that deep dive into relationships, parenting and mental health. All topics close to my heart and the heart of Kizmet. Kerri very gracefully reached out to me after reading an article about my podcast in the Sydney Morning Herald and generously gifted me her book, which I have here today, Out There, a survival guide for dating in midlife, which I seriously couldn't put down. I then grabbed a copy of her most recent book, The Secret Life of You, and it's a beautiful reflection and guide to aloneness, different to loneliness, which we'll discuss a little bit later. Both books are very relevant to being single after a long-term marriage breakdown. Your writing style's absolutely fantastic, funny, super engaging, and really relatable. When we met, realised that we had common connections, and I was surprised we hadn't crossed paths. And you just said, maybe we have
somewhere
maybe we have
missed each other.
Yeah, exactly.
By a second.
And when we met, we compared notes on what it was like to have kids and to have a long-term marriage breakdown, dating at our age, friendships, all the things that change after a long-term marriage breakdown. And there were lots of things that we associated with each other, related to, and there were things that were different as well. And I'm going to touch on some of those today. So I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I felt last time we could talk for hours and hours,
Exactly.
So we'll have to try and keep it brief.
Yeah.
I'll try and edit myself. It's hard.
No, let's go. So let's just start. I'm going to talk about your books and the differences and the sameness of relationship breakdown later in life. It's a divorce demographic that's increasing, as you well know. Tell me a little bit about your marriage breakdown and your role in that.
So I had been married for 17 years, but we'd been together for longer than that. My ex was my childhood sweetheart. So we started dating when I was 17. Before we called it dating, it was, what did we call it? Like
Hooking up?
No, it was
Going round?
Going round, I think, yeah.
Will you go round
yeah,
with me?
We didn't call it
Puberty
dating.
blues.
And we were together for 3 years, and honestly, I thought I was going to marry him, and, it was my first relationship. I was really in love, and he broke up with me. I was 20, he was 22, and he probably quite rightly felt that we were too young to stay together forever, and I was heartbroken. And we were apart for about 6.5 years, and I had 2 other relationships in that time, one which was quite nice, lovely boy, just not the right boy. And my ex had been living overseas and came back and basically said, leave your man and come back to me. And I did. And we got married. We had 3 kids. I really loved him. Like, there was never a time when I didn't love him. But by the end, I just was incredibly unhappy. I was really raising the kids by myself. It was a tough relationship, and I left with the 3 kids. He didn't want to move out of the family home, so I ended up staying with my parents with the 3 kids for a couple of months, which was really tough on all of us.
Yeah.
Then I found the apartment that we're still in, and once we got settled, everything changed, and life is really good now. But God, it was a rough time. I think I might have described it in the book, and I certainly think about it as getting divorced after a long marriage is like getting into a tumble dryer, and you are just kind of spinning round and round, and you have no idea when it's going to stop, and you're going to be let out, and you have no idea what the world's going to look like when it does.
So true.
Yeah.
I have a similar example that I use when I talk about a marriage breakdown. It's so interesting. We're both using water analogies.
Oh, yeah.
That it's like being tossed from a boat, being underwater, and not being able to see which way the bubble's going.
Yes,
you don't even know which way's up. And it's similar to a tumble dryer. Is this a short cycle? Is this a long cycle?
Yeah.
How will I survive? It sounds like you had prepared in a sense, though, so you weren't necessarily blindsided.
I
you
had
moved.
Definitely prepared. It was my decision. I didn't even realise I was doing it, but I was remember looking at apartments and just fantasizing about what my life could look like because it was so difficult. It was difficult for me. It was difficult for the kids in the marriage.
You were working?
I was working. Yeah. I was writing. I'd written my first 2 books. By then I was a columnist. But I raised the kids, as I said, essentially as a single parent within a marriage. So I was juggling it all. So it was actually easier for me parenting once I was alone. At least then I got some nights away from 2 of my kids. So yes, it was my decision. I was prepared, but it was still absolutely brutal. I left with a plan. I had my parents to go to, so that was really good. It was not ideal. I was sleeping like under the dining room table, but I had somewhere to go. And I think that makes all the difference.
And they understood.
And they understood.
Supported
were really
you.
supportive. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And how were the kids through that?
So the change was rough, but my 2 big kids were, I believe, relieved. They kind of knew the situation. My little one was more bewildered, but she was also much more resilient and easygoing. And it was a really rough time, particularly for my son, who found any kind of change really difficult. But once we were settled in the apartment, life was honestly much better for everyone.
Yeah.
And luckily we had no kind of custody issues. We sort of agreed. My son, he was 14 when we split, and he just wanted to stay in one place. My 2 girls went to their dads. It was essentially 1 weeknight and then 1 weekend night, either the Friday or Saturday, but it wasn't a lot. It was really 2 nights and like half a day, and that kind of worked for everyone. But ultimately, I think kids struggle with having to move between houses no matter what. And it gets harder as they get older because they have more stuff and they've got their homework and they've got after-school plans. So now, my middle one stopped going except for dinner a while ago, and my little one still sleeps at her dad's, but less because she's doing HSC.
So interesting for you if you were, as you said, in the marriage, taking on all the parenting roles. It was, felt like a single mum but married. And I think in a marriage, you're also trying to give to the relationship. So you're working, you've got a marital relationship you're trying to care for, and the kids. It's a lot going on. So you found yourself in an apartment. Your husband had not all of your kids, but a couple of them for a couple of nights a week, and you had some free time. How did you write? What did you do to fill your time?
I vividly remember my son went there once to sleep over and then decided he wasn't going to do that again. And that night, I actually felt like I was going insane. I remember vividly being at home and just feeling the walls kind of close in on me. I had no idea what to do with myself, how to feel. It was really, really scary. And it took a while. And I found my little one was only 6 when we separated, and being away from her was incredibly hard. That visceral feeling of I just want to be with my child. But she has a very close relationship with her older sibling who was with her. And, my middle one was 12 by then. And so I felt
They're
like,
young.
Still young, but they had each other. And then my ex actually repartnered really quickly. And once he was with his new partner, I really trusted her and was comfortable and felt like I'd been a bit anxious, but I felt much more comfortable when he had her, not because he needed a female, just because of the dynamic between us and the kind of person. He just has a different risk profile to me.
Sure.
And so when he was repartnered, that made me feel much more comfortable, and I could start to, I guess, enjoy my time off more.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where it was like if there was a change in arrangement and they didn't go, I'd be like, hang on, that's my free night.
That's my time.
Yeah.
Which leads into the 2 books. But first of all, I'm really fascinated. A lot of couples who divorce, there's animosity towards new partners. That's not the case for you at all. How did you evolve a relationship that obviously involves trust with your husband's partner?
Well, I guess the situation for me was different because I exited the relationship and I was really worried about him. I have never not wanted him to be happy. I couldn't live with him. I was angry about a lot of things, but I've never had a time where I thought I want him to go down ever.
Yeah.
And he's my kid's father. And I felt really relieved. I'd been worried that he would pine for me forever, which I don't think is arrogant as much as, what people say in relationships.
Yeah, sure.
And we'd been together on and off since we were children.
Yeah, very young.
And I think it was the ideal situation. She hadn't been married, hadn't had kids, was about my age, and was, fond of my kids, which is great.
Yeah.
And it took pressure off me. And it also meant if there were things like clothes that had been left and my ex and I weren't, in a good space, I could message her.
So you exchanged contact?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually caught up with them quite early on. I remember we had a coffee together just because I wanted to meet the person who was going to be around my children. And, I, at the time, was a minor public figure, so she knew who I was. I think she'd read one of my books, and we were just really fortunate. I wouldn't say that we're close buddies, but I like her and respect her, and so that makes it much easier. I can't imagine having to deal with a new partner that you don't like or your kids don't like. That would be awful. And I've met people in that situation. And
me too.
Yeah, it's
rare
horrible.
to hear what you're saying. I don't hear that often, and I'm so pleased to hear it. I think it shows a lot of grace.
Well, on both of our parts,
Yeah,
I think.
exactly. Yeah. And your
Yeah.
ex-husbands too.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you talked about, and we have been talking about, is having that first night where you're on your own. You think you're going to, and you've written 2 books. I'm fascinated. The dating book gave me so much joy. I was like, I'm not the only one. After you've been married for a long time, back, I think we've discussed this, when I was dating before my marriage, there were no mobile phones, no apps. And I'm interested, for lots of reasons, the dating book preceded the alone.
Yeah.
So
it did. So I left
Secret
my
Life of
marriage
You.
and really catapulted myself very quickly onto the dating scene. And in hindsight, that was a mistake. But it took me a while to recognise that. And in fact, what had happened is I was approached by an old friend who I had no interest in ever, like a guy that used to kind of try and flirt with me, and I would just laugh at him and laugh with my ex-husband about him. I knew that he had a bit of a, interest in me, but I just took it as a joke. He'd been, I think already by then, like twice divorced with a new younger partner. Anyway, and after I left my husband, I was so intensely vulnerable and so confused that when he made a move, I was like, I was kind of receptive to that. And so we had this, I guess you would now call it a situationship. We didn't have that name back then. And it was not a good thing for me. It was really destructive for me in the end. But I was just not in a place where I even knew how to be by myself, which is so unfortunate. But I guess I had to go through that process to get to where I am now. And so when that ended, I remember again on another night without my 2 younger kids, I started to sign up to RSVP because that was sort of the one that I'd heard about.
But a goodie. Yeah.
And oh my God, the questions, the
right?
endless questions. And I got about halfway through and I was like, I can't do this. This is just ridiculous. So I think I made my profile public for about 3 minutes and then logged out. And then I signed up to Tinder, which
is not really deep diving into your personality type.
Not
it's
at all.
Like
bust
size.
Yeah, a couple of photos and you're on your way. But ironically, there was somebody who actually saw me on RSVP who saw me briefly and then contacted me through, I think, my social media saying, I think I just saw you on RSVP, would you be interested in going out? So I think that was one of my early dates. We went out a couple of times. That didn't end well. A lot of them didn't end well. But I think it was a sense of just trying to distract myself from my new life, or maybe even a way of avoiding having to settle into a new life. There was always, for a long, long time, always somebody that I was chatting to on an app, somebody I was interested in, someone I was going on a date with. And it stopped me from really engaging with myself. And
the dopamine rush. It's a great distraction. You can spend hours on it.
Yeah. And, I wrote the book and I'm so proud of that book because I wrote this guide to dating in midlife that I didn't have access to. I had no idea what I was doing.
No information out there. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
I read, I was like, wow, somebody's actually written about what's going on.
But the thing that I didn't realise, I guess, till the end of writing the book, and I kind of allude to it in there, but the most important message, I think, is what came in my next book, which is that you have to be okay deeply on your own before you can approach dating, because I wasn't okay on my own. And when you're not okay on your own, you'll kind of accept anything in order to avoid being by yourself. And so I had very, very permeable boundaries. You know, I thought I had boundaries, but I didn't. I would accept really bad behaviour because the alternative was too scary. I had no bargaining power with men. So I remember the guy I was seeing in the beginning, I would say, you know, I'm not happy with you doing this or doing that. And he'd go, okay, well, I'll leave you alone. I was like, no, don't do that. You know, you actually have no position of strength. And so it wasn't until I had been dating for many years and then kind of gave it all up and learnt how to just be on my own.
So why did you do that? Did you have a particularly bad experience, or was there slow dawning? What happened where you were like, actually, this has been a distraction for a long time. I'm going to do something different.
Look, I had some good experiences in that I had some great dates. I met some really interesting men, a couple who became, longer term friends, some really passionate short term relationships. But all up, I was making incredibly poor choices.
Compromises too, by the sounds of
huge compromises,
things.
ignoring massive red flags.
Yep.
I was really burnt out. I got to the point after probably about 6 or 7 years, and I would have short breaks where I'd be like, I'm deleting all the apps, and but then you kind of load it up again. And I got to the point, honestly, where I thought, if I have to look at more faces on Tinder, if I have to swipe on Tinder, or I think I was using Tinder and Bumble mainly, I will just, I will scream. I can't do it. And then we had COVID, which was kind of a forced stop to all of it. And I had got to the end of my tether anyway. And I'd had, I think, one final really bad experience where there was somebody that I really liked, and, he ended up kind of temporarily going back to his wife, which a lot of men do, after the first kind of, encounter after divorce. He just freaked out, and of course it didn't last. But it was just an awful,
Ran back to mummy.
Yeah, exactly. Awful situation for me. And I was like, I've had enough. And then it was COVID, and a lot of people were still dating in COVID, but I was like, right, I am not happy. I am really struggling to sit with myself. I found myself spending like hours and hours just on my phone, just Instagram and Facebook and videos. And I thought, this is not working for me. I'm getting more unhappy. And I decided to stop everything. And I decided to turn off my phone, put down my phone, and learn to just sit with myself with no distractions. And that's basically how the second book came about. But it was I hate the word journey, but it was a real journey.
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah.
I learnt to keep myself company as I kept other people company. I'm not talking about men, I mean men, women. I learnt to be a friend to myself as I was a friend to other people. And there was all sorts of ways that I did that. But the thing that came out of it was that I became comfortable with myself. I learnt how to support and nurture myself, and sometimes in a very literal sense. Like, I can talk to myself now. If I'm struggling, I can literally talk myself through it, as in have conversations with myself, sometimes out loud, sometimes writing. And so when I approached dating again, it was with a sense of I'm comfortable and happy.
Yep.
And so I am only interested in someone who makes my life considerably better. Otherwise, I am genuinely not interested. Not just the showy, I get it. I hate men. This is not working. I meant it in a very real sense. So when I met my now partner, which was, I actually met him quite a few years ago, but we started seeing each other about 3 years ago. When I met him, I really liked him. But in the past, when I had not been comfortable alone, I would have really pushed these kind of connections and be like, I need to know where this is going. You know, I'm not comfortable with the uncertainty.
I never like hearing that question, where's this going?
Yeah, it was, but I was like that.
Organic.
There was a sense of desperation
I hear.
to kind of lock someone in. And we'd met before that. That's a whole story in itself. But then when we reconnected, which was actually during COVID, he called me and I was, you know, at the time thought, oh, this is really nice. He's calling me. It turns out he was just going through all his connections because he was living alone and bored and making contact.
Smart plan.
But we started kind of catching up just for, you know, socially distanced walks and coffees. And I really liked him, but I was so content just to leave it and see what unfolded. And it was months of kind of having regular walks and coffees and just chatting before anything at all
a lovely
happened.
slow burn.
The first time in my life I've had a slow burn. And so we had a real foundation of friendship and trust. And I knew I just liked being in his company. And I was deeply content for a long time with this is a great friendship. I'm happy with this. And that was a really unique situation for me. I don't think it's any coincidence that then this has been, without question, kind of the best relationship I've ever had.
Hearing that, and that there was healing and
So
alone
much.
time. And I did it slightly different to you. I was exactly the same at the beginning. Dryer, boat, thrown, didn't know what I was doing. But I really took time out, and I've practiced mindfulness strangely at this tiny little school that I went to in WA. They did experiential learning and we did mindfulness and meditation before those things were even words.
Yeah.
So I'm quite okay, and I spent a lot of time in my head to the point where after about a year my friends were like, this is enough. You need to get out there.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was interested in the way that you wrote the book. The dating was first, and it makes complete sense, that distraction. And I very much got to, because I know who I am, and also I think because I had such a long-term relationship, I don't necessarily need to jump into another one to have kids. It's different reasons for dating at this age.
Yeah.
And so getting back out there and dating out there was all the things that you said it was. But I'm very happy that I am okay on my own, and anyone that I have in my life is a bonus.
Yes, exactly.
Definite bonus. And that was highlighted to me, I think, a lot through the friendships that I had. And you were talking about being a friend to yourself. Yeah. And we talked about when we met, I think a difference between us, there was a big shift in your friendship relationships.
Huge.
When you divorced.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in that. What happened?
You know, I hear this over and over again from other people who are divorced, and unfortunately also people who've been widowed, is that married couples do not know where to put you. And I had really close relationships with my married friends, and they were still there for me, but I would meet them alone. I would meet them when we had girls' lunches. I wasn't invited, or very, very rarely invited out when, say, two of the couples in my friendship group were going out to the movies or something. To be fair, probably they thought that I was, you know, out dating or doing exciting things. Most of the time I was home alone, and that was really, really hard. And one of the things that really did save me was connecting with other divorced or never married women, because it's so important to have people who kind of understand where you're at. And, you know, married women really didn't have a sense of what it was like on the dating scene.
I think they think it's more glamorous and exciting than it is a lot of times.
And the number of times people would say, you know, oh, you're so fussy, you know, or someone would say, well, look, why are you still single? Like what?
Or it's a numbers game.
Oh, it's a numbers game. One of the chapters in my book is it's not a numbers game. There's no point going out on dates with people that you know you're not interested in. And also, I think married friends often have this idea that it is better to be in a relationship with anyone than to be single. So they wanted to see me in a relationship because they felt that it would be better for me, I'm sure for them, for harmony.
It's more comfortable for them. But I think
to have
a lot
a partner.
Of even single people think, I don't care, I just want to be in a relationship. And
always,
which that's not about being comfortable in your own skin. I'd prefer to be comfortable on my own and have somebody as a bonus than to sacrifice or compromise so much just so that I will feel comfortable. I'm quite happy going out on my own.
Exactly.
I can eat on my own.
My partner and I don't live together.
Yeah. So you still go out and do things independently. And
well, he's away at the moment. He's away with his kids at the moment, his adult kids, and he adds enormously to my life. And I do think it is ideal to be in a relationship with someone who is really supportive and nurturing and whose company you really enjoy and who you feel safe with. But I strongly, strongly maintain that it is far better to be alone than to be in an inadequate relationship. And I wish I had come to that a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think it definitely gives you more options. And I'm interested in that aloneness where you said I'm put my phone away, something that we discussed as well. You still keep a paper diary, a hard copy diary.
I do.
Which I have to say I totally love.
Yeah, I do.
But I don't know that I would get to any of my appointments if I was looking back. Tell me how...
Well, I actually forgot a friend's birthday because I didn't look at my paper diary. So, there are downsides. But, obviously I still have a phone. But I am very, very comfortable spending time alone with myself.
And not on your phone?
Not on my phone, no.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that I don't pick up my phone and scroll through Instagram.
Of course.
Sometimes.
Yeah, you're human.
I am. I'm human and I watch TV and I listen to podcasts and I listen to a lot of audiobooks. But I am genuinely content to, say, have a long drive where I have absolutely no music, no podcast, nothing, go for walks. I often will listen to a podcast for part of the way on my walk and then realise I've completely zoned it out and I turn it off. And I do a lot of walking and a lot of the time that's in silence. I can literally potter around the house and have conversations with myself. I find myself quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a long drive. I'm thinking you're having chats to yourself.
I do. And one of the techniques, I put a few techniques in the book of how to actually learn to engage with yourself. And one of the very easy ones to do is when you're in the car, say you're going to pick up your kid or you're driving to the shops, we kind of reflexively turn on our phones or turn on the radio. Just don't. And even if it's like a 10-minute drive, it's a really good time to just be with yourself and see what comes up. I have a very bad memory for events, but I have a very good memory for things like movies, and I can replay scenes of movies in my head. I have imaginary conversations with people all the time. I ask myself questions. So I will sit with myself in the car as you are sitting with me now, and I'll ask some questions like, what are you looking forward to next year? Or what do you think are the keys to a good relationship? And I'll just kind of answer them in my head.
I love that.
I genuinely
really
do.
like that.
Yeah.
I think I might try and adopt that, see how it goes if I can listen to that voice in my head. And what are the keys to a good relationship? You just asked yourself the question.
Oh, wow, I did. Yeah, well, that's something I've actually thought a lot about. And this is the other great advice I now try and give if anyone asks my advice when they're dating. I started off with a list of criteria, as I think so many of us do. And it was never about looks to me. It was never about height. So many people care about height. My ex-husband is short. I've dated short men. I have no problem with that. But for me, I had very specific criteria about what I thought that their lives should look like. And I wanted a man who had a postgraduate degree, because to me that indicated that he had a certain level of intelligence that I would, find stimulating. I wanted someone in a big job because my father had a big job and my ex-husband, ran his own firm, and I wanted someone in a big job. So I dated a lot of doctors and lawyers. Believe it or not,
same as the past, but different. Yeah, same but different.
2 neurosurgeons. Who does that? Like, bizarre. Neither of them were, really were any good at relationships. Absolutely terrible experiences. But still, I thought that's what I needed. And none of that worked out. And in fact, being in a relationship with people with big jobs is really difficult because you come way, way, way down on the priority list.
Part of your marriage.
Oh, well, I was just...
That's why it didn't work. You were doing everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time thinking when I was... going through that period of being on my own, what do I really want? What am I really looking for? How can I kind of boil that down into the absolute fundamentals? And I came up with 2 things in the end. And that was, I wanted someone whose company I really enjoyed. Because I would go on dates with men sometimes and they were great on paper. Yeah. We all know that great on paper thing.
Yep.
And I'd be bored. And then I'd go through this torment afterwards, like, can I say I don't want to see them again? Like, they're so good on paper. They've got a good job and they were
it's
nice.
It's not an interview. That's the thing about dating. It's not an interview, sadly.
Yeah.
You know, it would be great if you ticked all the boxes, come and work for me and it's all going to work, but it doesn't, sadly, it doesn't work like that.
Exactly. And then I'd feel guilty and I'd feel, oh, what's wrong with me that I don't want to be with him? So I thought, it doesn't matter. I have to enjoy his company and I have to continually enjoy his company and not get tired of talking to him. So that was the number one. And the other one was, I have to feel emotionally safe with him. And that sounds so obvious now, but the relationships I had with men, I never felt safe. So I would always get one or the other. It would be somebody whose company I enjoyed, but they kept me at arm's length, or they were abusive or unreliable, or they, you know, just would put me down, or they ran hot and cold. Or it would be with someone whom I felt really safe with. They were a nice guy, but I was bored by them. Yeah. So I can honestly say that my partner was both from the beginning, and I'm very lucky in that he's also really easy on the eye, which was nice. Yeah. But, you know, when you really like someone, they become much more attractive anyway. So he went from being handsome to me to being, you know, the most beautiful person in the world. But as I said, we had been catching up for a long time, and I never ever got sick of talking to him, ever. I really always looked forward to it. We could talk for hours, and I felt very emotionally safe with him. And then it just got to the point one day where I was sitting next to him. I remember we were in Rose Bay. It was still kind of COVID semi-restrictions, and we were drinking coffee outside, and I remember looking at him thinking, oh shit, I've been hit by, you know, by the kind of love stick. And I remember just thinking, I want to touch his leg. And then it was just a question of kind of waiting for him to catch up.
Which he did.
Yes. He did. Took a little bit longer, but he did. I think he was very wary of getting into a relationship. He'd been burnt in the past, but I waited for him to come around. And again, if it had been, you know, probably even a couple of years earlier, I would have been like, what's happening? Is this going anywhere? Push. And
there's desperation in that, I think.
100%.
So and I can hear in the condensing of, you know, this list, resume effectively of
Definitely.
They need to be all these things, and you've condensed it down to I have to like their company and I have to feel emotionally safe. I mean, like you said, it sounds self-explanatory, but really making it so simple, so beautiful, such an open heart, and there's no desperation in that.
No.
It's just so beautiful.
And my partner does not have a postgraduate degree. He didn't have, you know, a huge job. He ran his own small business. But I realised none of that mattered. Yeah. Like, it never mattered.
Well, it kind of mattered because the relationships where you did have that didn't work out.
Exactly. And I think, to be fair on me at the time, it's so difficult when you are using dating apps to screen people. And I think we use those kind of things like, oh, he has to have a postgrad, or he has to be 5'11" or whatever it is, that just to kind of cut through. But unfortunately, that's also the biggest flaw in the apps, is that it doesn't work, and you can't tell anything about a connection from a few photos and lines of text.
So true. Logan Ury, she's part of Hinge, I believe. I might be incorrect about this, but she talks about seeing more and being more than the list of a resume. And she talks about the post-date date. So you go on a date with somebody and it's not an interview. It's, how did I feel afterwards?
Yes.
What did they bring out in me?
Yes.
What did I like about myself when I was with them? It's called the post-date date, and I'll forward it to you.
Love that.
Yeah, it's really, and it's very aligned with what you're saying. We all do it in dating.
Yeah.
Are they tall enough, good-looking enough? Which, for my height, guys above 6 foot, it's like 14% of the population. It's like a very small, so immediately that's editing out a big portion of the population.
Yeah.
So
I'm lucky I'm a short ass. So.
Yeah. And look, I'm also fine with going out with people who are the same as you were. Tall, short, it doesn't really matter. Looks don't matter. It's personality and bringing a bonus to my life.
Yeah, but the problem is, obviously with dating, you meet someone and you have to decide in a really short period of time, is this somebody I'm interested in getting to know more? And we can't do that with everyone. So you're forced to make decisions really, really quickly. And there's no easy way around that. My philosophy is really you say yes until it's a hard no. But if it's a hard no, then there's no point wasting any more time.
Yep.
And it can be a hard no with no reason at all. You don't actually need an excuse to not want to be around someone.
Yep.
And that was something that was really hard for me to learn because, as I said, I would think, oh, he looks good on paper, or my friends say I should be interested in him. He's a nice guy, or he's got a great job, or he's good looking, or whatever. But I just didn't feel it. And so to me, just not feeling it is enough. And sometimes it takes you, a few dates to see if you do feel something or not.
Yep.
But if you don't feel it, then bow out.
I think I find it better not to give an explanation. I'm just not feeling the connection. So it's not an objection that somebody else is overcoming.
Well, I think I wrote a whole chapter about that because I used to, in the beginning, I would try and find a reason, and it was almost like justifying it to myself, but also to them. And I remember once with a perfectly nice man saying to him, look, you don't see your children, and I'm really close to my children, and so, it's just not going to work. And he was so upset, and rightly so. He said, you're punishing me for something that's not my fault. I don't know why he was estranged from them. And I felt absolutely terrible. And the reality was I was just looking for an excuse because I just didn't feel it. So I learnt to say exactly what you just said. Said, thank you, I'm just not feeling a connection, and no one can argue with that.
And just no, I don't want to go on a date. No, there's no reason. I'm not busy. I'm not any of those things. It's just a no.
Yeah.
You've come so far dating, kind of in the reverse order that I did it, to spending time.
You're smarter than me.
No, I definitely am not. I think you're an incredible wordsmith, beautiful, beautiful writer that is so engaging, and there's so much to be gained out of reading your books and your columns. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Don't miss an episode. Hit subscribe where you're getting this. Follow our socials and ask any questions on my new website where we're building for like-minded people wanting to reconnect.